Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this session and supporting this conference. My name is Eric Byous. I'm in US EPA Region 9's Brownfields program, and I work in Northern California and some areas of Southern California as well. And we're going to talk about EV charging station redevelopments and all things electric vehicle related to brownfields during this session. So EV charging stations are sorely needed throughout California to meet California's electric vehicle and climate change goals. They're also an excellent, novel, and unexplored reuse option for brownfields in disadvantaged and low-income communities and all communities beyond that. Namely, they promote our air quality improvements from emissions caused by commuters and goods movement through industrial corridors. They could be developed on sites where buildings are a challenge due to vapor intrusion, which was discussed this morning. When placed in strategic locations, EV charging stations, they can be key to economic development on multiple fronts, which will be discussed today. Also, there's state and federal funding resources to promote EV charging station redevelopment, including a US EPA's Brownfield Assessment and Cleanup Grants. Lastly, they could be paired on the same site or with nearby sites with renewable energy and storage projects to increase community resiliency. Successful EV charging station redevelopment requires effective upfront planning, including an accurate knowledge of the customer base, of the regional needs, of the actual air contaminant sources, not perceived sources, but the actual sources to truly address the problem. It also requires a nimble pursuit of available resources, all of which our experienced and talented speakers are going to discuss with you today. So by way of a quick introduction, I want to introduce our two speakers, Jessie Denver and Lisa Castellone. Jessie is a manager of distributed energy resource programs at East Bay Community Energy. She leads the development of demand-side solutions that deliver benefits to residents and businesses in Alameda County. Her priority initiatives include the development of EBCE's electric mobility strategy and local solar and energy storage projects to increase community resilience. Lisa is a tribal program manager at Grid Alternatives. She's one of the original team members of Grid Alternatives Regional Office. Over the past 10 years, Lisa has been responsible for promoting Grid Alternatives programs throughout Riverside, San Bernardino, and Inyo counties. She also helped develop Grid's tribal program and works with several tribal governments with their renewable energy projects and goals. With that, I'll pass this along to Jessie. And throughout the presentation, please put any comments you have, any questions that you have in the comment area in the chat box, and we should have some time for Q&A at the end. So Jessie, please take it away.
Great, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
All right, terrific. Next slide, please. So as Eric noted, my name is Jessie Denver and I manage East Bay Community Energy's Distributed Energy Resources Program. And my two primary areas of focus are on transportation and goods movement and our community resilience programs. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you an overview of who EBCE is within the context of the area we serve, and then talk more about the state's transportation electrification goals and how EBC fits into that, and a few of the use cases that we're looking at specific to brownfields and how they factor into our strategy. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of EBCE. We are Alameda County's not-for-profit public power agency. All of the cities in Alameda County and the county itself came together in 2016 to form a joint power authority that established a new public power agency. And this joint power authority then launched East Bay Community Energy. And we essentially procure power on behalf of residential, commercial, industrial, and public sector customers throughout the entirety of Alameda County. And we deliver that electricity through the investor-owned utilities, wires, and poles. And this was something that was enabled by state legislation that passed over 13 years ago, that enabled local governments to take more control of the way that their communities are powered to be able to meet their renewable energy and climate action plan goals faster. So EBCE is governed by a board of directors that is local elected officials from each of the member JPA communities. And so that also enables us to be very nimble in the types of programs that we develop, the investments that we make, and we have the ability to design our own rates and have our board approve those rates. Finally, because we are a not-for-profit government agency, we don't have shareholders. All of our mandates are locally driven to ensure that our investments from the revenue from the sale of electricity are reinvested into the community to create jobs and healthier communities for all. And in turn, that enables our local government partners to achieve their goals faster. So please keep in mind that EBCE's service territory right now is the entirety of Alameda County, and that we've just expanded into neighboring San Joaquin County as well, with the city of Tracy opting in, and their service will begin in early 2021. Next slide, please. So California has some pretty ambitious transportation electrification goals, and these were established by Governor Brown, essentially stating that by 2030, there will be 5 million zero-emission vehicles on California's roadways. And there are some interim milestones that we are working to achieve. 1.5 million ZEVs on California roadways by 2025. And the biggest one here is 250,000 publicly available EV chargers by that date. And this is both level 2 and DC fast chargers. Alameda County's kind of component of that 5 million ZEV goal, you can see those numbers here. So what we're working towards is having essentially 200,000 zero-emission vehicles on Alameda County's roadways by 2030. And today we're at around 35,000. So we have a lot of work to do, both in the light, medium, and heavy-duty sectors. And this is really important because our service area, which is this kind of pinkish highlighted area on the map here, includes all of the major interstates for the most part, the majority of the major interstates in the Bay Area. So you have 880, you have 580, you have I-80, you have the connectors, and then out into Tracy, you have the 235 and the 580, which connect to I-5. So this is also very important for commuter vehicles, as well as the goods movement sector. Next slide, please. So we have been working to identify what are the gaps in charging infrastructure in Alameda County, and we've been doing this in conjunction with the California Energy Commission. And you can see that the gaps are significant. And to achieve those 2025 and 2030 goals, we need charging infrastructure, not just where people live, because in other kind of more suburban communities, people can charge at home. In Alameda County, nearly 50% of our population are renters who don't have access to charging infrastructure. And again, our service territory is the economic engine for goods movement in Northern California. So we also need to be addressing how do we ensure that fleets have the refueling infrastructure that they need. So we are focused on looking at deployment of level 2 charging infrastructure for a number of applications, including workplaces, multifamily dwellings, retail places, for fleets and other public facilities, as well as DC fast charging. And what we're really interested in is looking at how do we invest in deployment of very strategically placed DC fast charging hubs that can be available 24/7, 365, and serve a few different use cases. Next slide, please. So to that end, again, use case number 1 is light duty drivers and commuters. And this is because, again, almost 50% of our residents are renters. And we've done the analysis of our building stock. Our multifamily building stock, 90% of it is 70 years or older, which means it has, it's going to need utility upgrades at the building level, which is going to take time. And if we want to move the renter segment over into zero emission vehicles, then those folks need really convenient charging infrastructure, and we need to look at how do we site fast charging infrastructure near where these kind of concentrations of multi-unit dwellings are throughout our service territory. Again, this isn't just for our own residents. Commuters, we have, again, 5 out of 10 of the most congested freeways in the Bay Area. 30% of all trips are regional commuter trips. 1/5 of those are pass-through, meaning they actually are going through Alameda County, so people need access to charging infrastructure to get from point A to point B. And almost half of all those trips actually originate outside of Alameda County. So we want to ensure that we're helping to provide a midway solution for people who are moving through our county, which then in turn also helps our neighboring counties achieve their goals, because we're providing supporting infrastructure for the vehicles that are moving throughout our various service territories. Next slide, please. And then fast charging, you know, as I noted earlier, Alameda County is the economic goods movement, is kind of the economic engine of Alameda County. We have the Port of Oakland, we have Oakland International Airport, which move freight in and out of the Bay Area. Again, we have all of the major freight corridors, including now Tracy with the connection to I-5 and the Central Valley. And in our service territory, we've analyzed DMV registration data, and we have over 20,000 medium and heavy duty vehicles, class 3 through 8, registered throughout our service territory. And we know where those vehicles are. They're integrated into our customer database. And we've also mapped where brownfields are. So in this snapshot here, you can see medium duty vehicle registrations, and the color of the triangle kind of indicates how many medium duty vehicles are within that triangle. So at some of these locations, there's 10 vehicles, some there's 25, some there's only 2, but we've mapped those with where there are known brownfields. And we really want to look at how do we think about the reuse case of brownfields to serve as common charging yards that could meet the needs of fleets. And medium duty fleets and most heavy duty fleets, they actually only travel 100 to 120 miles per day. So if we're able to deploy some really convenient shared common charging yards for these fleets, it might help them actually make the transition to zero emission vehicle options faster. And that is our goal at EBCE as the electricity provider, is to become a first mover market for medium duty electrification by 2030. Next slide, please. So to achieve some of this, we really wanted to look at, like, is it even feasible for us to reuse brownfield sites for these 2 intended use cases: DC fast charging hubs for light duty commuter vehicles, and the second being the medium heavy duty kind of fleet application. And so we've applied for a grant from EPA, and were awarded that grant to specifically look at brownfields for this use case. And so what we needed to do was first look at this from a pretty narrow lens. And that was, all right, let's look at brownfields that are up and down I-80 in our service area. So we had an initial list of 40 sites that we needed to pare down to 3 to 4 sites. And these are some of the selection criteria that we use to actually take that broad portfolio of sites and scale it down. So you can see here, kind of in that first level of selection criteria, we really looked at some of the physical site criteria. You know, is it big enough to host a common charging yard or fast charging hub? Is there nearby retail amenities, or is that something that we'd have to develop on site? And then the most important part is the actual environmental brownfields consideration, the piece of the puzzle that we can't answer by ourselves. We really need to have technical support to help us with that. And that's what EPA has been helping us with. So have the assessments been completed or are more assessments and cleanup at that particular site needed? Who is the owner? Is there a current use case at the site, or is the site vacant? Then once we narrowed our kind of selection down, we took another second level kind of lens, and we said, all right, are these sites near hotspots of multi-unit dwellings that we have, where we know that there's a lot of people who live near these brownfields? Does the investor-owned utility, their poles and wires, their distribution grid, have enough capacity to be able to handle the additional load if we were to develop a fast charging hub at a site? And in our case, PG&E is the investor-owned utility who manages the wires and poles, and they actually have a map that shows where the grid is more congested versus less congested. So that then enabled us to say, all right, let's pick sites that are in a zone where we see less congestion on the grid than more congestion. We also looked at some of the site kind of hosting capacity that might be at that site to ensure like we wouldn't have to do major upgrades. And then we did another lens or layer of analysis, which is, you know, how close are these sites to I-80? Most are very close. Are they near an on-off ramp? Are the roadways themselves actually commercially zoned for different types of vehicle use, which is really important from the local government context, because some vehicles are actually not allowed on certain roadways. And, you know, this is something that we're working through right now. So this is all a feasibility analysis to tell us, is this something that is a viable reuse case for us to be looking at in the next 3 to 5 years from EBCE's perspective? From, you know, can we start to think seriously about investing in these sites for this particular use case to help achieve our goals, the goals of our local government partners, and ultimately the transportation electrification goals of the state. So with that, I will stop there and look forward to any questions that you might have.
Great. Thanks so much, Jessie. Now we can move along to Lisa's presentation now, and she'll get going. We have about 12 minutes left in the session, so please take it away, Lisa. And thanks for the questions that have come in so far. We'll address questions at the end of the session.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm with Grid Alternatives and Energy for All Renewable Program, and I'm very happy to be here today. I work with tribal nations and looking to work more in the space of brownfields. So next slide, please. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about what Grid does, the job training component that Grid offers, and then also our clean vehicle referral programs. All the pictures you're going to be seeing are from projects that we've done. We are a join Grid and make change kind of an organization. Next slide, please. So we have a lot of programs at Grid. We have our single family. We are a renewable energy solar installer. We work on multifamily, community solar, and also the microgrid solar. We have solar access and installation programs to clean mobility that we're working with. We have a national tribal program. We work with 43 tribal governments across the country, and we also have an international program. And our clean mobility is something that we're a space we're getting into, but it's growing very quickly. As Jessie was saying, the state of California has some very high deliverables, and we're trying to get into the space of equity and justice. So next slide, please. So we are the nation's largest solar nonprofit. We have offices across the country. We've got a lot of solar installed. We provide energy solutions to underserved communities. So we traditionally work in disadvantaged communities. We work with, we have a job training model where folks join us, and it's like a hands-on training that we do. which makes our program very unique. And then going into the vehicle space of installing chargers, pairing chargers with solar, we will be providing hands-on training, which is a very important component to making sure that this renewable clean vehicle programs get spread out, and there's people to do it. And then our referral program is we have quite a few different programs I'm going to be sharing a little bit about today. The vehicle charger program, the one-stop shop, our tribal pilot, and then also the mobility options. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, training with Grid is a very important component, and it's going to really fit into the space of clean mobility. We provide this free hands-on, go through a training session and then come out and build it type of a model. And it works really well in the communities that we serve, which are the disadvantaged communities across where we have funding at. And so folks can come out. We have initiatives, especially for women. We have an initiative for reentry, and we have an initiative for veterans. So it's a really, it kind of fits in a lot of the places where people need to get this job training, and we provide that. We're going to be hopefully getting more funding to do it in the clean vehicle space. Next slide, please. So our clean mobility overview is we're really helping families save money on transportation costs and connecting them to services that are available through state-funded programs to clean our air. With Grid, our equity, inclusion, and diversity mission, it really pairs well with the renewable energy, I guess, tidal wave that's happening across the country. So along with solar, the clean mobility and charging, we're really kind of linking people that are oftentimes left behind. Next slide, please. So clean transportation is key to meeting California's climate goals. As Jessie was mentioning, California has some really advanced climate goals. So the goal is to reduce greenhouse emissions, have a carbon-free society, and eliminating greenhouse gases. And transportation sector, as Jessie was mentioning, has some pretty high goals. And so there's billions of dollars going to be invested in this transportation infrastructure. And Grid is on the other kind of side of the lens right now, is how can we bring these programs and this education and information so people will buy into it, along with charging. Next slide, please. So one of the issues as we've been studying it is the access problem. It's an equity issue. So oftentimes the lowest income earners spend the most on gasoline. There's barriers to accessing programs. The infrastructure, it really varies by communities, and the lack of public investment in the disadvantaged communities and low income communities really places a very large need. So as we hope that as the state is looking at where we're going to be putting these chargers and infrastructures, we're really here to be that voice for the community on those areas that need infrastructure built that are in disadvantaged communities. So next slide, please. Here is a screenshot of the priority communities for the equity programs. This is the state, and there's some designated disadvantaged communities and the low-income communities. And a lot of the community-based organizations, tribal nations that are looking at clean mobility and infrastructure are located in these regions. And so we're hoping that we can partner with folks that are looking at these larger projects to install infrastructure. Next slide, please. We are launching a one-stop shop. It's going to be customer forward-facing early 2021. And this is going to be an opportunity for people to go in, enter their information, and then get linked with services that are available, as you all know, or maybe don't know. In California especially, there's a lot of programs that are coming out. And so this will be one space where people can get that information, and we're partnering with, it's funded by community services cap and trade funding at work. Next slide, please. Some of the services the one-stop shop will be doing, there'll be electric vehicle incentives, there'll be charging infrastructure matched with solar. That's going to be a really important component. The big projects we're really working on now, our partners are all looking at how can they pair solar with the EV, whether it's in the multifamily, if it's a community solar project, a big one on the ground, or if it's a microgrid. Folks are really interested in having the charging accessible for the community at large, and for, if it's a business, their customers. A lot of the tribal nations are looking at this as a income revenue generating stream. So the one-stop shop is really going to be bringing all of this information to one spot. Thank you. Next slide, please. Some of the clean mobility goals, we are also helping folks with this. There's a new grant out here in California called the Clean Mobility Options Voucher Pilot Program, and GRID is providing technical assistance. There's about 22 million bucks. This is a pretty, it's a pretty big deliverable on this grant. They're looking at mobility options in disadvantaged communities, and they're looking at multiple opportunities for whether you're going to be creating buses or other types of clean transportation. There is a $2 million carve out for tribal nations, and GRID is offering technical assistance to help with the development of the grant for this opportunity. It's really to improve access for safe, reliable, affordable transportation to communities throughout California. So this is really to help try to tie transportation together with different modalities. Next slide, please. So I'm personally working on another pilot project. It's called the Tribal Outreach Strategy for the Clean Vehicle Assistance Program. This is really like a forward-facing program directed at finding out what tribal nations, how they respond to clean energy. I'm working with the Torres Martinez Reservation down by the Salton Sea. They're a very small tribe located in the DAC map. A lot of the families there have personally been affected by air pollution. And so we're gonna see how charging and electric vehicle and the whole clean mobility really resonate with the tribal members. And so it's a bit of a pilot. We're gonna be doing a needs assessment, education. We're gonna be installing a charger and then showcasing vehicles and trying different methods to see different types of marketing, to see what really resonates with folks, to see if we can't get more people on board with clean mobility, the clean mobility wave, so to speak. We will be installing a charger down there, and hopefully it'll resonate in the community and it'll resonate with other tribal nations. A lot of the tribes have gaming casinos. There are several tribes that have brownfields, and we're hoping to partner and maybe look at ways we can work together on future projects. Next slide. So at GRID, we are a community. We have team leaders, volunteers with our workforce, the tribal, the community, industry, corporate, our families that we serve, and really working in policy to make a difference. You know, it all starts with a dream. All of these projects takes a lot of hard work, but with a dream, that's where you kind of have to start to have your goals spring from there. And at GRID Alternatives, we're all about making kind of dreams accessible, and to work in brownfields would be very gratifying to bring this electric vehicle charging infrastructure, and folks that are adopting the charging clean mobility would be, it's a great partnering, and I'm very thankful to be a part of this conversation. And that's all I have. Thank you.
So next slide, please. Thank you so much, Lisa and Jessie, for the excellent presentations. I just wanted to quickly say before we dive into the a few questions is EPA's Brownfields program. Many of you already know that we fund assessment and cleanup work for brownfields and impacted lands in general, given the theme of this conference. But I wanted to highlight that given the planning that's necessary and the work early in the process for a successful electric vehicle charging station installation, that our resources, our grants can actually fund a lot of the planning that's needed, including market studies, visioning work, infrastructure assessments, including electrical infrastructure assessments, which is critical, and even preliminary site design to identify what kind of cleanup and where on a site cleanup would be needed. This chart is in here for a reference for you, as these will be recorded, and please contact us if you have more questions on it. And in terms of addressing a few of the questions with a little bit of time that we have, the first one was, how much renewable energy production do we need to meet projected growth in electric vehicles? I don't know that that's known yet. I will just quickly answer that. I don't know that's a known quantity yet, that electric vehicle charging stations can be charged from renewable or non-renewable energy sources. And I think the goal of the folks talking today are going to try to do as much renewable energy charging and use of those electric vehicle stations as possible. For Jessie, there was a question. Did you see the next question there, Jessie, about CCAs, and are there other CCAs doing what you're doing? Did you want to?
I don't actually see the question. But
oh, okay. Yeah. The question was, are there other CCAs doing what you are doing? Any idea on what's happening in Contra Costa and northern counties?
Yeah, great question. So all of the CCAs, we are coordinated across all distributed energy resource kind of topic areas, and also on policy and pilot programs and kind of full-blown programs as well. Our colleagues at MCE, which serve Contra Costa County, and our colleagues at Sonoma Clean Power, kind of up north, neither are looking at brownfields in the way that we are. EBCE, we are the first to be doing this, and we're really trying to kind of pave the way and help everyone else who has applicable brownfield sites where this would be really, a good reuse case, kind of clear the path and then make it easier for everyone else to do this work. And that's kind of the way we all collaborate. One CCA is piloting something, we're all watching, rather than having us all do the same thing all at once. In EBCE's service territory, this is simply just a bit more front and center because we do have so many of the interstates in our service territory, and because we are the center of the goods movement economy in the Greater Bay Area. And as Eric can attest to, there is a lot of evaluation that needs to happen. So as much as we can kind of be the ones who test this out first and see how to make it happen and then make it easier for everyone else to follow suit, that's what we're really trying to do right now.
Great. Thanks, Jessie. Ignacio, do we have time for one more question, or is it?
Just one more.
Okay. Yeah. So Lisa, a question came for you that programs appear to be funded mostly by grants. Are there enough grants coming out of the state to meet the projected demand?
We do get a lot of grant funding. We do fee for service project for, I guess, like-minded community-based organizations. But we're in the grant space. We help write grants, federal grants, state grants, and have technical assistance. We're always looking for more funding, though.
Yeah, and with this, there's such a huge need, and Jessie emphatically shook her head no with that question. If you saw that, there's never enough. There's such a huge demand going forward. And like I said in the beginning, this is a new idea for brownfields, new idea for contaminated lands, but I think there's great potential here. So thank you all so much.
Well, thank you also to our speakers. We're going into a break now, but if you would want to connect with our speakers, please chime in on the community page or message them. There are many ways to connect on the Whova application. And we have a 15-minute break, and we'll see you at 2:15 for the next session. Thank you so much again, Eric, Jessie, Lisa.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye. Thank you.